Snow blankets Pelican Valley in the winter of 1902. Somewhere in this remote pocket of Yellowstone's interior, a handful of park surveyors are doing something that would have seemed unthinkable a generation earlier, counting the last wild bison in the United States. When they finish, the number they arrive at is almost too small to believe. 23. 23 animals. Not 23 herds, not 23,000. 23 individual bison standing in the snow, representing the entire wild population of a species that once thundered across a continent. These were not just any bison either. This was the last group that had lived continuously on the same land since prehistoric times. A population that had somehow slipped through more than 2 decades of poaching and slaughter without vanishing entirely. For years afterward, conservationists would assume that even these survivors carried compromised bloodlines, diluted by well-meaning but reckless crossbreeding experiments. That assumption would stand for over a century before anyone thought to actually check. That same year, park officials moved quickly. 21 additional bison were purchased from private owners and brought to the Lamar Buffalo Ranch, an effort to reinforce the wild herd with new blood before it disappeared for good. It was a fragile, improvised rescue, the kind of moment that, in hindsight, looks like the hinge point of an entire species' future. If a number that small, sitting in a single valley, is the reason 23 million acres of American wildlife history didn't end quietly in the snow, then it's worth following that thread to the end. There's something almost unbearable about how close this came to being permanent. It's worth sticking with this story to see exactly how far it traveled from here. So if you want to see where it goes, subscribing means you won't miss it. To understand why 23 was such a devastating number, you have to go back further, to a time when this species barely needed counting at all. In the 1500s, somewhere between 30 and 60 million bison moved across North America, spread over roughly 1.5 billion acres of grassland, stretching from the Great Lakes to the Rockies, from Canada down into Mexico. It is difficult to overstate the scale. This was not a healthy population. This was one of the largest concentrations of a single large mammal species the planet has ever recorded. Then came the collapse. Commercial hunting and westward expansion tore through the herds with a speed that still startles historians. By 1884, only 325 wild bison remained. 5 years later, in 1889, William Hornaday, chief taxidermist at the Smithsonian Institution, conducted what may be the most sobering wildlife census in American history. His count: 541 bison left in the entire United States, 85 free-ranging, 200 in the federal Yellowstone herd, 256 scattered across zoos and private collections. From 60 million to 541 in the span of a few centuries. And within that already devastated number, Yellowstone held the last continuously wild plains bison population in North America, the only place in the country where bison had never stopped being bison, unmanaged and unconfined, since before written history. What happened next defies almost every assumption people carry about how endangered species recover. Today, more than 323,000 bison exist across North America. That's not a modest rebound. That's close to a 600-fold increase from the 1889 low point. But before you credit any single institution for that number, consider how it actually breaks down. Roughly 90% of those bison, more than 290,000 animals, are privately owned, managed as livestock rather than wildlife. Only about 31,000 are managed specifically for conservation on public land, and of the entire 323,000, fewer than 15,000 are genuinely wild and free-roaming. Sit with that for a second. Bison, as a raw population number, now outnumber African elephants across the entire continent of Africa. And yet the overwhelming majority of that recovery happened almost entirely outside the framework most people imagine when they picture wildlife conservation. So if public conservation land accounts for such a small slice of the total, the obvious question becomes unavoidable. Who actually rebuilt this population? And why has that story stayed so quiet? Before answering that question, there's a piece of the puzzle that only became visible very recently. A discovery buried not in a ledger or a census, but in DNA. In 2022, A team of researchers at Texas A&M University's College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences, Sam Strope, David Forgax, Andrew Harris, James Dare, and Brian Davis, published a genomic study that would reshape how conservationists think about bison purity altogether. They compared the genetic sequences of major historic and modern bison lineages against nearly 2,000 domestic cattle genomes, hunting for evidence of a hidden legacy, the crossbreeding experiments of the early 20th century, when ranchers and even some conservationists mixed bison with cattle in hopes of creating a hardier animal. What they found overturned a century of conservation belief. Every bison lineage they analyzed carried identifiable traces of domestic cattle DNA, including Yellowstone's. For decades, experts assumed Yellowstone was the last untouched pure bloodline that had escaped cattle crossbreeding. But high-coverage sequencing revealed that even the Pelican Valley descendants carry subtle traces of cattle genetics. The completely pure, uncompromised bison herd everyone thought existed turned out to be a myth. It's a remarkable finding, and also, in a strange way, a limiting one. Yellowstone's uniquely wild herd numbers only in the thousands. It cannot, on its own, explain how the species climbed from 500 animals to over 300,000. That number came from somewhere else entirely. Here is the reveal at the center of this whole story. Roughly 90% of today's bison population exists because private ranchers built it, one herd at a time, for reasons that had nothing to do with government mandates or conservation directives. Starting with a few hundred animals in the early 20th century, ranchers grew their herds into what is now approximately 290,000 bison nationwide, driven by meat production, breeding stock sales, and agricultural tourism. South Dakota alone now holds nearly 34,000 commercial bison, more than any other state, and the country's commercial herds collectively total close to 192,000 animals. None of that required a federal recovery plan. It required an economic reason to keep bison alive, and ranchers found one. The protections that came out of Yellowstone in the early 20th century were essential. Without that original rescue, there would have been no bloodline left to build from at all. But those early government efforts represent only a small fraction of where the modern population actually came from. The bulk of the recovery happened on private land, driven by private incentive, largely outside the story most people assume they already know. But private ranching is only half of the picture. There is a second, entirely different force behind this recovery. One built not around profit, but around return. Since 2019, 625 bison from Yellowstone have been transferred to the Fort Peck Indian Reservation in Montana, and from there, distributed to 29 tribes across 13 states and into Canada, coordinated through the Intertribal Buffalo Council. The first transfer, in August of 2019, moved 55 animals, the first time Yellowstone bison had been relocated directly to tribal land as an alternative to slaughter. In February of 2024, another 116 bison made the same journey, 108 males, 4 females, 4 calves. Today, roughly 25,000 bison roam nearly 1 million acres held by 85 native nations across 21 states. At Fort Peck specifically, Robert Magnan, director of the tribe's buffalo program, has documented something remarkable happening on the land itself. Since bison returned to roam freely across 13,000 acres there, grassland birds have come back. Native grasses that had thinned out are thriving again. It isn't just a population number recovering. It's an ecosystem remembering what it used to be. Between private ranchers protecting their own economic interest and tribal nations reclaiming a species tied to their own history, the modern bison population was built almost entirely from the ground up, not from a government office, but from people with a direct stake in these animals surviving. Which makes what's happening in federal court right now even stranger. A 20-year study conducted by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine tracked disease transmission across the greater Yellowstone area and found that wild elk transmitted brucellosis to cattle 27 separate times. Wild bison, over that same 20-year period, were responsible for 0 documented transmissions. 0. Even though roughly 60% of Yellowstone's bison test positive for brucellosis antibodies, researchers estimate only 10 to 15% of those animals are actually capable of spreading the disease at all. And yet, in 2024, the National Park Service updated its Yellowstone Bison Management Plan, raising the target population from 3,000 to 6,000 animals, a move grounded in the science showing bison were not the threat they'd long been assumed to be. Montana's governor, Greg Gianforte, responded by suing the federal government, arguing the new plan increases brucellosis risk to the state's cattle industry. The lawsuit made its way through federal court in Billings, Montana, and as recently as July of 2026, a federal judge denied the government's request to pause the case. It is still, right now, unresolved. 27 transmissions from elk, 0 from bison. And still, years later, the argument over how many bison Yellowstone is allowed to have continues to play out in a courtroom. It raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with. Should wildlife policy follow where the data points or where the political pressure sits? If you have a view on that, it's worth saying so, and subscribing helps make sure you catch how this case is eventually resolved. So what does all of this actually add up to? Strip away the assumptions, and 4 forces explain what happened to this species. Private ranchers, driven by economic incentive, account for the overwhelming majority of the modern population, a high-confidence, dominant driver. Tribal restoration programs, smaller in raw numbers but accelerating every year, represent a second major engine of recovery, one grounded as much in cultural reclamation as in ecology. The genetic uniqueness of Yellowstone's herd matters enormously for conservation science, but at only a few thousand animals, it was never going to be the volume driver of the comeback. And the slow, contested shift in brucellosis policy shows a system that is moving in the right direction scientifically, even while it remains legally and politically stuck. Put together, this is not the story of a government program that saved a species. It's the story of a decentralized recovery, ranchers protecting their herds, tribal nations reclaiming theirs, and scientists quietly overturning assumptions that had gone unchallenged for 100 years. The bison came back, but not the way most people assume, and not through the channel most people would credit first. And that raises a bigger question than this species alone. If the recovery of one of the most iconic animals in American history happened almost entirely outside the institutions built to protect it, what does that mean for the next species standing at the edge of the same cliff? Return for a moment to that valley in the snow. 23 animals standing in the last wild place of their kind, with no way of knowing what would come next. That number no longer reads as a story of survival granted from above. It reads as a starting point, the first link in a chain built not by permission, but by people on the ground who had their own reasons to make sure these animals didn't disappear. And in a Montana courtroom, right now, the next link in that chain is still being forged. The bison survived the 20th century almost by accident. Whether they thrive in the 21st is still, quite literally, being argued over in federal court.